So, good afternoon and welcome to the fourth episode of Congressional Conversations, where we discuss the priorities of New York's Jewish community with our congressional elected officials. I'm your host. I have the honor to serve as Executive Vice President and CEO of the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York. So today we are very excited to be joined by a great friend of JCRC, Congresswoman Grace Meng. She currently serves on the House Appropriations Committee and is vice chair of its subcommittee on state and foreign operations. She represents New York's 6th district, encompassing Queens, including West, Central, and Northeast Queens. And she's also co-chair of the House Bipartisan Task Force for Combating Anti-Semitism. Welcome, Congresswoman. It is wonderful to see you again and to have you join us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gideon. It's great to be back here. And thank you so much for all the great work and relationship building that JCRC and your whole team does on a daily basis.
Thank you. We're very lucky to have a great team. And I know your folks and the folks who work with you, we have a lot of discussion, a lot of things going on together, and really appreciate that. So I thought we might kick off as May honors Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Maybe we could talk about the bill that's heading to the Senate, the AAPI Museum Bill. And I think it would be of interest to those participating today to hear a little bit about that bill and where it comes from and what you have in mind.
Thank you for asking about this important topic. And coincidentally, May is not only Asian American Heritage Month, but it's also known as Jewish American Heritage Month. And so just another great example of how our communities are bonded and work together. I'm really excited because this legislation, which I've actually been carrying for a few years now, passed in the House about 2 weeks ago. And it's basically the first step towards building an Asian American museum in the nation's capital. I think that to have an institution like that, not just for Americans of Asian descent, but for all Americans and for people all over the world to be able to come one day and to learn more about the role that Asian Americans have played in this country.
Wonderful. And I think, you know, in the Jewish community, we certainly have that great sense of the importance of educating a wider population about the heritage of the community here and also our own communities, because our own community also often doesn't understand and know. And I think certainly a commemoration and historical education, ultimately there are many ways to educate, but museums are often the anchor around which programs of education happen. So that's wonderful. Really, really wonderful. Maybe we could turn to Israel. I just came back from Israel, where I had the opportunity to be with a number of colleagues from New York and to meet with a number of Israeli political leaders and also Palestinian leaders. There's obviously a great concern about the recent developments in the Middle East, in Israel. Terrorism has obviously been on the rise very rapidly. And a great concern, also some optimism as well, as we look at, you know, the Abraham Accords, and there is certainly steps that have been taken. Would love to get your perspective. You've been deeply immersed in support for Israel, engagement with Israel throughout your whole political career. How do you sort of see the situation now? What do you see? What are the concerns? What worries you? And how do you see us moving forward?
Sure. Well, thank you so much. And first, I cannot miss an opportunity to acknowledge the efforts of JCRC, because my very first trip that I took to Israel was with JCRC when I was in the New York State Legislature. And that really opened my eyes to so many of the important issues that we work on as public servants and as elected officials, and especially now in Congress. I got to, when I first went to Israel, speak to everyone from people fighting on the front lines to the families, the children, the moms who have to worry about safety and their lives every single day. And so we got to witness firsthand how important the US-Israel alliance is. And I want to make sure that people understand that this is truly a bipartisan issue. Republicans and Democrats working together. We hear from everyone, from Republicans to Democrats, local constituents right here in the district, in our business community, about how important it is as we view our alliance with Israel as key to our economic strength, our national security, and preserving and strengthening democracy from here in the US to all over the world. As a member of our House Appropriations Committee, I proudly voted to provide Israel with the $3.3 billion in security assistance. And this money literally helps Israel defend itself and its families by itself against mounting threats that continue to grow across the region. I'm the vice chair of our House Appropriations Subcommittee on State and Foreign Operations, and proud to annually lead, for example, the bipartisan effort to secure $500 million in missile defense funding for Israel. This important funding supports the procurement and co-production of life-saving missile defense systems such as Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow 3. And I want to emphasize how bipartisan this issue is. You know, Republicans have sometimes falsely claimed that Democrats don't support Israel, that we're against Israel, and that we don't support the Iron Dome. And I just want to say clearly that that is absolutely false. There may be a select handful on both sides of the aisle who don't share my support for Israel, but it was Democratic leadership who brought that additional funding for Iron Dome to a vote on the House floor. And so I just want to make sure that people understand how important this funding is, how critical it is for saving lives in Israel. And I will continue to fight for that assistance in Congress.
Well, and thank you for your engagement and support with Israel. And on this visit, I was in Sderot, and we visited with some education leaders. The Sapir College, which is a wonderful, wonderful public institution in Israel, right on the border with Gaza. And when we were talking with the president of the college, he talked about what happened when there were rockets coming, how the significance of Iron Dome to the college's ability to operate. We met also with one of the locals in the area who also talked about that. So in a very concrete way, the impact we just last week with a chance to hear in the context of education, in the context of so many different ways, that security is just so important. And so we really applaud and appreciate your engagement and involvement with providing that as much security as possible. Obviously, nothing is full and complete, but tremendously important. And so thank you for that. And I also had an opportunity to meet with one of the Holocaust survivors who was airlifted recently from Ukraine, which was also just a real chance to see the engagement of Israel, and also to talk with some of the people who worked on the assistance that Israel gave, a humanitarian hospital for refugees. So I think Israel's engagement in the Middle East and wider is just so important for all of us, and as allies with the United States in so many different spheres that go beyond its own security. So thank you. So turning close to home, we've seen of great concern, I think, to all of us, sort of an uptick in, not more than an uptick, a significant increase in hate crime in New York. And I think we're becoming used to seeing these sort of little clips of video that's captured somewhere where someone comes and just out of nowhere comes, and we see these sort of attacks against Asians, against Asian Americans, against Jews, and obviously a deep concern, I'm sure, to all of us, and we've seen it across New York. So maybe you could talk a little bit about, firstly, about what you see this concern about this rise in racial hatred. It's affected the AAPI community and the Jewish community. And would you like to talk about what it is that you think we can do and do together to try to really combat this, both from a sort of a law enforcement point of view, which JCRC, as you know, works very closely with law enforcement, and also from an education point of view, and we're very engaged with fellowships and education. And sort of really, I think we really interested to hear how you see this and how you see we can work together.
Sure. This is such an important issue facing America, and especially facing the Jewish and the AAPI communities right now. Cases of anti-Semitism and hate crimes against Asian Americans have risen dramatically across the country, especially in the last year or two, and including right here in our home city of New York. In 2020, approximately 60% of religion-based hate crimes in America targeted Jews, even though Jews constitute only 2% of the US population. And in that same year, in 2020, about 43% of all hate crimes that took place nationally targeted Asian Americans. And it's even more disappointing that of the recorded 524 hate crimes last year in New York, two-thirds of that total targeted both the Asian American and Jewish community. And our communities have a really long history in this country of standing up for one another, fighting against discrimination, ending discrimination in immigration policy, advancing civil rights protections. And so it's not a surprise to me that in these dark times, especially in the last few years, our communities have really come together and worked in ways, and unprecedented ways. And that's something that's always been important to me, even outside of the scope of discrimination and violence against our people. When we started seeing this rise in discrimination and hate crimes about 2 years ago, it was many Jewish leaders here in New York and across the country that came to me and approached the AAPI community and said, how can we help? We have been through this. We know what it is like to be discriminated simply because of who you are or what you look like. I worked on legislation, the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act, and we worked hand in hand with Jewish leaders across the country to get that legislation passed across the finish line. That bill, people often refer to as something that tries to decrease violence against Asian Americans, but in truth, it is legislation that seeks to decrease and eliminate bias, violence, and discrimination against everyone. And so that is something that we are still working with the Biden administration and local organizations to fully implement the bill. We want better tracking of these types of incidents, whether they're a bias incident to a hate crime. We want better tracking of these incidents, because without, if you don't properly measure something, you are unable to mend it or to fix it. And so we think that's incredibly important, and to provide more resources to teach our law enforcement agencies, our local organizations, on how to mitigate these types of incidents, and also how to properly investigate these types of incidents and crimes. But the truth is that this is just a part of the solution. It is not a magic pill. As we've seen, cases have not disappeared automatically because we passed the law. There are so many other issues that we have to address, mental health, lack of social services. Half the incidents that occurred in New York last year were perpetrated by people with mental health issues. And so that's something that we need to invest better in as a city, state, and country. And also the part about education, which we talked about earlier. It's so important that people view all communities, including the Jewish and the AAPI communities. There are too many people that look at someone that looks like me, or looks at someone who's maybe wearing a yarmulke and might think, oh, they don't really belong in this country. They're foreigners, they're outsiders. And in order to decrease that negative perception and stereotype, we must provide more education.
Right. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think for us at JCRC, I think it's a few different, it's a law enforcement measuring, looking at it from a crime perspective, and it's looking at it from a longer term perspective. And look, I think to go back to the very beginning of their conversation, museum, education, people understanding who a community is, it's not going to solve every problem. It's not going to stop every single person who comes and just randomly attacks someone. But I think it creates, certainly, I think you're absolutely right. It creates the base of knowledge and hope that hopefully leads to this broader respect and understanding and a societal understanding of what makes up this amazing city and this amazing country. Turning a little bit to the sort of the specifics on security, the nonprofit security grant program has been sort of very important for houses of worship and other nonprofits. Could you just give us a little background on the program that's been obviously very important for us and one that you've played such an incredibly leading role, and to talk a little bit about the program and how it's impacted in the district and in the city?
This program is incredibly important, and it's had an incredible impact right here in my hometown and district of Queens, New York. We have about 30 nonprofits, including houses of worship, day schools, community centers, who have been awarded this grant to harden and make more effective their security efforts. It's anything from additional fencing, bulletproof windows, cameras, hardened doors. They've been installed throughout my district and are working to hopefully keep more families and more people safe. Annually, I'm proud to host a workshop which includes an amazing presentation by JCRC, so thank you, on how nonprofit organizations can apply for this federal funding. I was proud to help secure $250 million, which was an additional $70 million over last year for this program. However, this still falls short. We are not done yet. This falls short of the $360 million that I've been pushing for. And so we will continue to fight to see this money increase and able to be used to help even more people and organizations. But I want to thank JCRC. It's been great to collaborate to make sure we're getting the information out, how to apply. Our office can provide reference letters, for example, to local organizations that may want to apply, and they're welcome to contact our office.
Thank you. Well, we really welcome the partnership, both at the level of securing the funds, where you've played such a major role, and right down on building by building in the district and in the city with you and your office. So really, we appreciate that. And our CSI, our community security initiative, which is created by JCRC and UJ Federation, obviously we're just so proud to be partners with you in this work on the ground. So the last issue I sort of want to just talk a little bit about, and is one that's on, I think, all our minds of gun violence. And we've seen this in the city. It obviously affects every single community. It affects your district. Um, can you tell us a little bit about how you see the challenge, how you see the future directions that we can go in, and what we as a community together can do to try to take on this challenge, which is just so heartbreaking, I think, for all New Yorkers.
Yeah, definitely. This is something that, I worry about, not just as a congresswoman, but as a parent of two young kids. We have seen an influx of guns, whether here around the city or all around the country. And this issue is devastating. It's in some parts of the country, it's easier to get a gun than it is to buy a car or to get prescription drugs. And that is not the reality that we should have to live with. In the past few weeks, just in my district alone, there have been people shot on the streets of Oakland Gardens, Queens, where another area is Fresh Meadows. A 14-year-old was shot and is likely now paralyzed. Last week, we saw the tragic news that a delivery food man who had been working in the community of Forest Hills for over 20 years and was known by the neighbors and the local store owners, was shot and killed on the job. And so this is something that is terrifying to so many of our neighbors and so many New Yorkers, from safety issues in the subway to an increase in gun violence and the ongoing mental health crises across our country. Our community and our country needs more and deserves more. I'm really grateful that everyone from our mayor, Eric Adams, to President Biden have, for example, addressed the issue of ghost guns and are making them illegal in this country, because that's something equivalent to like a take-home kit that one could assemble and build a gun that could kill people without any form of tracing or identification for that weapon. And so that's something that we need to get off the streets in our schools, out of our neighborhoods immediately. So this is really a pressing issue. It literally will save lives if we can start passing more gun safety legislation as soon as possible.
Right. It's certainly a scourge that it's just so painful to read those stories and to see each shooting has behind it a story. And when you read the stories of what happened, the background of victims, it's certainly tragic, I think, for all of us. And it, and you're certainly been familiar with it through what's happened in the district and in the city. So thank you. So is there anything else that you would wanted to share with us that's on your mind? We've certainly really appreciate our close partnership. We've certainly a lot of issues to work on together. Any parting thoughts for us?
It's risky to ask a politician if they have any other words to share without giving time limits. But no, I really just wanted to take this opportunity to thank everyone in the JCRC family and to all the supporters and volunteers. I don't think people in the JCRC world even fully understand what an amazing impact you have had on our communities here in New York City, and the work that you've done, long-lasting work to expand coalitions to help people understand the importance of the U.S.-Israel alliance and friendship, And so I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you. It's been an amazing honor to work with you and your team.
Well, thank you. It's a very, as you've heard me say, a very reciprocal feeling. And I know it's a relationship that goes back right to the early days of your political career. And you have just been so deeply engaged and caring about so many issues that are important to the Jewish community, obviously, as well as all New Yorkers. Right from the start of your career. And we're just so delighted to continue this partnership, and as new issues arise, to find new ways to build and strengthen that partnership. So a big thank you to you. And we look forward to getting together again soon. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you to our viewers for watching. And this is a conversation that we will continue. Thank you very much, and have a good day. Thank you.